Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Speak, Film, and Enter, a podcast where we review and rank movies. I'm Nate.
And I'm Dylan.
And I'm Adam.
I've started, Adam. I can't look at you while I'm doing the intro.
I know. I've noticed that I see you look away. I also almost said my name before Dylan's this time because it's been a minute.
Yeah, I just need to avoid eye contact.
Again, trying to step on my second place title. I've always been second.
You've been gone for a month, bro.
So we have a really fun episode today to introduce a more fun episode next week, we believe.
Yes.
So what we are going to do, and we kind of discussed, we wanted to do some kind of bracket of horror movies for the month of October. We initially started maybe the best of all time. That felt huge and sort of impossible to narrow down. So what we have decided to do is we are going to be doing in roughly a week. We'll be recording another episode where we go through and vote on the best horror movie of the 21st century.
Yes.
And what we've done is we've gone ahead and made a bracket. We've narrowed it down to 32 movies.
Mm-hmm.
So we seeded them 1 through 32. We set it up March Madness style. So there are 4 different regions with 4 different number 1 seeds. So each one has a 1 through 8.
Yep.
And in this episode, we're just going to introduce kind of what we're doing, all the movies that made the cut, how we seeded everything, and we'll go through all the matchups and give everybody kind of an overview of what this looks like.
Yep.
And then we will include a link in the description of the episode on YouTube and in the podcast that people can click on and go to, and they can vote. They can just play with the bracket themselves as many times as they want. I believe I set it up correctly. Otherwise, it'll just be a one and done. But I think you can play with it as many times as you want. And we're not looking for, nobody's going to win anything. But if you just want to go through it yourself, see how it turns out, you can do that. If you want to predict what you think we're going to do, you can do that as well. We just kind of want to get an idea of where the audience sides on a lot of this and compare it to how it goes for us. So then next week, after the voting closes on Sunday night, technically Monday morning, at midnight on what will be, I want to say the 23rd to the 24th. Then that'll all close. And then for the next episode that we do on this, the 3 of us are going to go through every matchup and we're each going to vote, and best 2 out of 3, whichever one gets the most votes advances. And we're going to go through the whole bracket ourselves in one episode. So I'm really looking forward to that. That should be really fun. And either you guys want to jump in here, say anything?
Yeah. So I guess I just wanted to say that, when we were trying to establish the criteria for which movies would make the cut and which ones would not, we had to narrow it, like you said, down to just 21st century. So everything in the last 22 years. And then also we decided to eliminate the horror comedy movies, or ones that we felt like were 50-50 or maybe more of a comedy than we wanted to keep it to
comedy first.
Yeah, we wanted to keep it to horror first. All these movies have to primarily be a horror movie, and that was just a way, because when we were looking at the movies, there were 4 or 5 that were kind of goofy, they are scary, but they're also kind of, and it's hard to compare that to it's hard to compare Shaun of the Dead to Hereditary. They're just so different. It's just not. So we tried to keep it to pure horror. We definitely have a few movies on here that have comedy elements, but it had to be primarily listed as a horror movie. Comedy second.
That was a good thing to bring up, because if we feel like the movie's primary goal is to make you laugh, then we pulled it. So no Shaun of the Dead, no Zombieland, no Tucker and Dale versus Evil. Yeah, those 3 were all out. There are a few others in there that were kind of considered and chucked because of that. And then there are good movies that didn't make it. We had to narrow it down. It was not easy.
No,
but we will say, with what we decided to put in there, the seating is purely numbers based.
Yes.
Based off their average score on Rotten Tomatoes, IMDb, and Letterboxd combined.
Yeah.
So
that's the most fair way we can thought about, right?
Right.
Yeah,
it was also
let the numbers decide.
We didn't want to have to spend an entire evening arguing over
the seeds.
No, this one should be 8 instead of 11.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we also felt like that's what the voting is for. Like that's where the
Mhm.
arguments are supposed to come in. So we
Exactly.
let kind of the numbers dictate what's going to be in here. And
Mhm.
then beyond that, we'll have our more heated arguments once we get into the voting a week from now.
Yep. And it's interesting because even with just going by the numbers and letting those ratings decide and keeping it objective, there's still some very interesting matchups that we probably, even if we had tried to plan it, we wouldn't have came up with. So it worked out. It was serendipitous in a way.
Yeah, well, there were also some that I almost felt like we might have tried to actively avoid this if we had.
Yeah. Like, oh, I don't want this movie or by the same director, perhaps, or like similar actors are in these. Like, I don't want to put those against each other because how do you compare that? Like, you know what I mean?
Or similar like themes. There's definitely one matchup in particular that I feel like is like, oh man, these two movies are going for the same. They're in the same lane. They were going for
Yeah.
the
Right.
same type of horror movie, and now they're against each other. Like, yeah, there's some interesting ones. I'm excited to go through.
Okay,
the
so
list here.
I'll share my screen here. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, you'll get to see what the bracket looks like. If you're listening on the podcast, click the link, and then you can see what the
Scroll
bracket
through
looks
yourself.
like and all the matchups and everything. But we'll go through each matchup here, kind of give it a little preview. We're not going to get too much into. We don't want to tip our hand too much on what we're thinking, but we'll just go through the matchups here to show everybody what made the cut and kind of what to look forward to. So. We'll throw this up here now. It looks a little small, but we can click on each one and kind of make it larger. So we'll go through them one by one. So the top left, the number one overall seed for the best horror movie of the 21st century is Get Out from 2017.
Yes. Again,
and that is going to be taking on a movie that started a huge franchise and much more in the slasher realm, and that is Saw, the original Saw from 2004, which squeaked in at the very end as the 32 seed in the tournament.
Yeah, and there was, the 32 seed, like 30 through 32, the numbers were pretty close. So we had, a little bit of, we could make the call. And I think we thought Saw deserves to at least squeak in because it was such a game changer at the time. It sparked that huge franchise. I mean, I don't like a lot of the Saw movies, but the original one it's got a great twist. It isn't just like purely just like torture horror. There's actually like somewhat of a like purpose behind it.
Yeah.
Which I felt like all the later movies, they're just like, I don't know, it doesn't matter what the story is, just have a, whatever like nightmarish thing we can come up with, just subject our characters to that. Where I felt like the first one at least had some sort of direction.
Oh, it was definitely a good idea before it decided to be all about the torture porn or all about like putting people in like ridiculous situations they could never get out of. It really made you think, and it had more of like a plot and drama as opposed to being like all about.
It's very like straightforward and kind of like visceral in the horror, and not so just like like eye roll, just over the top ridiculous.
Yeah, or like jump scares or whatever it happens to be, right? So
and then
I should
the number
say
one
too. Or go ahead.
I was gonna say and then the number one seed, Get Out, basically, universally acclaimed across all three of the sites that we used the rating system for, and in a similar way, didn't spark a franchise, but kicked off Jordan Peele's directing, and now he's done 4 or 3 movies since then. And so it was also kind of the beginning of a new era, and this was right in that A24 horror movie kind of golden age when they were just hitting with The Witch and Hereditary and Get Out. It was just, they were really on a roll.
This is not an A24 movie.
Oh, really?
Nope.
Okay, well, it seems
Blumhouse.
Like
it feels like an A24 movie. It's fresh enough and original enough, and but it is a Blumhouse movie.
The one that got away, but still, it was of that era in the middle of the decade where it felt like the horror genre kind of was pivoting to like really cerebral, slow burn, really
smart
tight
horror
scripts. Yeah, it felt like that was in the middle of kind of the changing of the guard of horror movies and what we consider great horror movies.
Yeah, for sure. And I did want to say too, there were some. I have not seen all 32 of these yet. I still have 5 I need to watch, but this is part of why we kind of let the numbers dictate what was going to be in here for the most part, because otherwise we felt like we were each going to have to watch about 40 movies this month.
Yeah.
And that's about as many as we possibly get to on the roundup. We're like, yeah, I watched 40 movies this month, and I'm always significantly smaller. I mean.
So we thought, let the numbers,
how are we going to pull that off?
Let the numbers choose, and that'll dictate what we have to watch, and then we'll have fun sharing our opinions on them on the episode where we actually do the voting.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
all right.
The next matchup here in this region, the 4 versus the 5 seed, is The Host from Bong Joon Ho in 2006, and then Green Room, one of the few movies on here that I think has like no supernatural elements whatsoever.
Yeah.
One of those like, oh god, this could actually happen to me, kind of,
or like it probably has happened at some point in time, like
right.
Yeah, very based in reality. Like, yeah, you know, those sketchy rural dive bars where you don't know who's hanging out there. And, you know, you and your band go to just play a show and earn a quick buck. And, you know, then shenanigans ensue.
Shenanigans.
But, yeah, no, this is a very interesting pairing. Especially because The Host, you know, I think, Nate, you haven't seen that one yet. So you're going to watch that before we make our selections. But early Bong Joon Ho, kind of classic monster horror movie, monster movie with that kind of South Korean, well-written, well-directed, you know, cinema that we've definitely talked about a lot on this show. We're big South Korean movie fans here. So I'm really excited for you to watch this, and this is going to be a interesting matchup because I really liked both of these movies.
Yeah, I'm a big Green Room fan, and I love Bong Joon Ho, so I'm really excited to finally watch The Host. Sorry, I just had to switch that up so I could zoom in a little bit here. I think that looks a little better.
Yeah.
Next matchup in this upper left region.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, because you said the 4 versus the 5 seed. I was like, what? I was like, okay, so these are broken up into
They're broken up into 4 regions, seeded 1 through 8. So it's like we're in the round of 32 of the NCAA tournament right now.
Okay. Yep. Okay.
So then we've got Tigers Are Not Afraid from 2019 or 2017, depending on where you look, versus The Descent, which that one, I think we all watched this like in a big group one time, like a few years ago at our buddy Steve's place for Halloween. I think this is going to be a really fascinating matchup because you've got kind of like a really under the radar sort of quieter story with Tigers Are Not Afraid, where the supernatural elements are kind of in the background and the story would work without them there. I also think that's true for The Descent, where you get some weird stuff eventually, but this movie is also just scary and claustrophobic without any of that stuff.
Oh yeah. Agreed, for sure. I think it's almost, when you watch The Descent, there's a whole bunch of the horror that just completely comes from just the horrors of getting stuck in a cave, period.
Yeah.
That's scary enough.
The first 20 minutes of this movie, 30 minutes of this movie have almost nothing like in common with the rest of it. It's just like, okay, we're getting to this cave, we're gonna go spelunking, and we're gonna have some
group
fun.
Of friends,
and then oh look, this is interesting, that's weird, and like keep going, and then like everything changes, and it's like, oh, this is a different movie than I thought I was getting into.
Yeah, for sure.
And also, it's become, I think it's safe to say at this point, The Descent kind of has like a cult following. I feel like it does. It's highly regarded.
Absolutely.
In our generation, and critically kind of acclaimed as one of the best ones of the 21st century. So this is a very interesting matchup, two kind of under the radar.
And Tigers Not Afraid, and to some extent, The Descent as well, made me just remember this. Is another reason to do this is, maybe you haven't heard of all of these movies that we've got in here.
Yeah.
And this is just a good place to find some horror movies that are maybe a little under the radar that you haven't seen, maybe some foreign ones like The Host or Tigers Are Not Afraid here, or some kind of under the radar cult following older ones like The Descent. So kind of brought up a lot of them for me, that like a lot that I just thought like, oh God, I still haven't watched this. I've been meaning to forever. This is finally a good opportunity to do that. I find this matchup interesting.
Hold on though. Just before we go to the next one, I just want to say about The Descent too. This might have just been my own personal experience, but I feel like there was like a 10-year stretch where The Descent was not on any streaming services.
Yeah.
Like it was one of those movies that I wanted to watch for a long time, and it just wasn't available anywhere,
absent.
like forever. Like I don't know if they did that on purpose, but what it was like. So then when I can't remember where it dropped, but then I was finally able to watch it, and I think I've seen it like 2 or 3 times in the last few years since then. But yeah, for a while this was like one of those like, God, I've heard it's so good, but I can't find it. Type of deals, which adds to the mystique.
In that same vein, when we go through this, the actual episode, we will be trying to tell you if any of these movies are on streaming, where you can find them on streaming, so that you can go through and say, hey, I haven't seen this one. I'll try to watch it. Then I can vote or whatever.
We'll make a note of it for sure.
Yeah.
And then the next one's really interesting. I should say, too, because with Tigers Are Not Afraid and like some people, the definition of horror movie is different depending on who you're talking to. And we tried to just sort of encompass everything.
Yes, yeah.
Like Dylan mentioned, though, we took out the comedies, but you know, like Tigers Are Not Afraid and Devil's Backbone, they've got a ghost in them. Are they particularly are they the scariest movies in the world? No. But they deal with the supernatural. They deal with scary subject matter, and there's a ghost, so we threw it in because we can, and they're really good movies. And so we got Devil's Backbone from 2001 from Guillermo del Toro against It Chapter 1, specifically Chapter 1, not Chapter 2.
Yep.
In the first round here, Devil's Backbone with the 2 seed, It Chapter 1 with the 7 in this region. And what I found really interesting was a potential, we might not get it, but a potential second round matchup between Devil's Backbone and Tigers Are Not Afraid, because Issa Lopez, I want to say, the director for Tigers Are Not Afraid, listed Devil's Backbone as like one of the primary influences on that movie.
Interesting.
And if you've seen both movies, you know that's just it's obvious, really.
Yeah. They make a great double feature.
Exactly. So comparing the two will be really fascinating. But I really like both of these movies. Devil's Backbone, Guillermo del Toro is one of my favorites. It is probably my favorite Stephen King book. And I really got a kick out of Chapter 1. I think I saw it like 3 times in the theater. So
dude, 1 is so much fun.
1 is a blast. This matchup is going to be really fun. Also, just because both of these movies are about like groups of kids battling evil.
Yeah. So it's not like we're going like, oh, some like adults like handling problems or whatever. It's just like they're both like coming of age to a certain degree, and movies dealing with the same types of problems. So.
And they're both kind of dealing with like the supernatural or like the evil force is based in like the location that they live in. It's like they're the setting for the movie, their neighborhood where these kids live is like the site of this supernatural trauma from the past that now is like become something evil, you know? So it's like they're thematically similar, but also I think it's fascinating how different they are as far as like how well known, like It Chapter 1 was a huge success. Everybody saw it, made so much money. And The Devil's Backbone from 2001 is definitely like a hidden gem. Most people have never heard of it. If it wasn't for this podcast and you being my friend, Nate, I probably never would have heard of it. I mean, it's like, so I think that's fascinating too. You got the big star and the under the radar kind of sneaky pick.
For a second, I thought you were crediting the podcast for letting like the world know about the Devil's Backbone.
Listen, we're bigger than we think.
We're trying.
We're bigger than we think. We did have some international fans after that. After we did the Bong Joon Ho movie Parasite from a couple
Parasite
years ago.
episode,
so,
yeah, that's
true. We're reaching out. We're global these days.
So looking forward to that one for sure. Then we can get our way down to. You want me to go down or go over?
So that was the first region.
Yeah, we'll stay on the same side because these are all potential Final Four matchups.
Do you remember what the number 2 overall was? Because
I do.
We could go that because we could go that way first.
So the Lighthouse. This was a surprise. This is the number 4 overall seed, and I was really surprised to see the Lighthouse rated as highly as it was. Not for it to be rated highly, but I was surprised that it came in 4th on our just site averages and got a 1 seed. Very, very strange movie. You know, the second movie from Eggers, the follow-up to The Witch. It's unique for sure. And
it's divisive for sure.
That's why I was surprised it was so high. Is because it seems like one of those movies that would have like a 53% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yes. Yes,
you know,
and like,
but like
you
a
watch it, you loved
97%
it, or you watch it
critic
and you
score.
fucking hate it. Like,
well, and in my experience, yeah, like 1 out of every 3 people that I talked to about the Lighthouse didn't like it.
Right.
I mean,
that's part of it too. Just word of mouth. So many people were like, "What is this?"
yeah, I watched this in quarantine with my roommates at the time. So there was 4 of us, and it literally was split down the middle. 2 of us were like, "That was pretty good," and the other 2 were like, "What the fuck was that?" Like, I don't want to see that
Clearly,
again.
there are people who think this movie is amazing.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean, there are elements for sure, and then we go to Dawn of the Dead, which is that
the remake?
The remake, yeah,
the remake, the Zack Snyder
and that's
remake.
I have not seen this yet, so I need to watch that one before this next episode. But that should be an interesting one for sure.
Yeah, and just some quick backstory. I kind of fought hard for Dawn of the Dead to make the cut in those later. I can't remember exactly what seed it is, like their 28 seed or 20. It's like the 20 overall.
The 29.
And basically, I fought for it because, you know, not all the ratings are great, but at the time when it came out, in my opinion, it came out a year after 28 Days Later, and I think those 2 movies really like reinvigorated the zombie genre and sparked kind of the zombie craze that led to Zombieland and The Walking Dead and just this like onslaught.
Zombie video games and stuff.
Zombie video games, like
Walking Dead.
They were, as a monster, zombies were kind of, you know, tired, like they weren't really scary. Romero zombies were always so slow, and it was kind of like, well, it'd be easy to like get away from those. But then 28 Days Later and this come out where it's like, oh no, the zombies are super fast and really aggressive, and like you're more likely than not like not gonna be able to outrun them or anything.
Yeah.
Like, and that just, it flipped the whole thing. It made everything way scarier. And also, I mean, it is just like, it's definitely like, you know, kind of turn your brain off a little bit, like just like
absolutely
have a fun time, which is, it's such a interesting pairing between like the deadly serious The Lighthouse, which is like you might as well watch it in a museum, like while orchestra
it's all in
plays
black
the
and white, like all that
versus
shit.
Dawn of the Dead, which is definitely like it's 2 a.m. and you've had a bunch of beers. It's like, oh, Dawn of the Dead, oh yeah,
I'll stay up and watch this. Like,
yeah,
it's so polar opposite. So I love
Dylan, I do want to remind you, you're going to need to tell us when we get to it. You mentioned that there was a matchup in the first round where you felt like the 2 movies were trying to do like the same thing.
Yes.
So please bring that up when we get there, because I'm curious as to what that is.
Okay, yeah.
So the 4-5 matchup in this region. So the winner of that will get the winner of A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night from 2014 and The Conjuring in 2013. And I wanted to talk about The Conjuring a little bit because for me, this is kind of, it showed a different side of horror to me at this age. I never liked slashers growing up, and we got a ton of those in like the 80s. So they were there like right before we were born, and then the 90s, and then like the 2000s, like you still had Saw again, but you just were still getting all these remakes or just 8th versions of like Halloween and Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yep.
And I never liked those kinds of movies. So I was never into horror much as a kid. And then The Conjuring came out, and it was the first time I felt like I watched a horror movie that I thought wasn't just there to like startle me and show me a bunch of blood and gross me out. And in my mind, at least, it's kind of the beginning of the more like psychological, smart horror that we saw in the 2010s.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not enough of an expert to say that it is like what spawned the rest of those movies, like The Witch and those types of things that followed. But I've always kind of viewed The Conjuring for me as the beginning of getting into like that side of horror.
I'd agree with that. I think too. I lumped this movie in, although it's not as good. The new Amityville Horror with Ryan Reynolds from, I think it was a couple years before The Conjuring came out. Kind of the same thing. It's that like it's ghosts, but it's supernatural, and there's a bunch of reasons why certain things are happening, and they try to supply you with like, oh, there's more of an explanation while also being like completely terrifying.
And there's strong themes of like family dynamics and family breakdown. It's like, you know, it's like once the family starts turning on each other and the mom and the dad are like turning on each other, then it's like that's when things get worse.
Yeah,
it's
like all bets are off. It's not like things are going well at any point.
it's not just teenagers being punished for having sex.
Yeah, and like figuring out and beating the bad guy. It's like, no, there's problems. There's like legitimately terrifying things that are going through and happening.
Yeah, and then going up against A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. I mean, I think the definition, this is probably the most like under the radar movie in this bracket, I think.
Definitely close to it.
This horror movie, not a lot of people have heard of it. Very slow burn, but very much like in the modern horror realm, like with the themes that it tackles and the fact that it's not going to show you like a bunch of blood and try to scare you that way, but it's the horror comes from very real stuff.
Yes.
Okay. While also, there's also a monster.
And it's in black and white, which, I think works really well and kind of just makes it unique and is part of the reason why, maybe it has kind of the high ratings it does. Like it's kind of a critic's darling type of movie.
Yep.
What's the, I feel like the spelling bee here, the national spelling bee, but what is the country of origin of A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night?
I'm not 100% sure. Adam, do you want to look that up while my screen is covered here?
I will.
Yeah, I think
it might be an Iranian movie.
I believe it is
an Iranian ghost town. In the Iranian ghost town, Bad City is the start of this on IMDb. Yep. So it is.
I like the cover a lot too.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Cover's great. Persian language horror Western film.
Yeah, and then an Iranian vampire Western shot in black and white with a killer soundtrack is the storyline on IMDb.
Oh yeah, and the soundtrack is pretty great.
Yeah,
so
all right. I haven't watched this one yet, so I this is one I'm excited to get to. Obviously, knowing that I've seen The Conjuring many times.
Yep.
So seeing how that stacks up, that should be fun.
So then the 3-6 matchup in this region is Raw from 2016 against It Follows, one of my favorite horror concepts.
Yes.
And Raw is the debut. The director, she just released Titan last year. Can you pull a name on that for me?
I got it. The director is Julia Ducournau.
Yeah, it's a French movie.
Definitely not pronouncing that right.
Yep. And then It Follows. In fact, they're both on Netflix right now. Not 100% sure.
I believe they are, yep.
And then Raw is another one of the few that I still need to get to, but this one's really interesting to me because these are also both kind of like indie, under the radar ones that weren't like huge box office splashes. So if you haven't heard of either of these,
both of these are on Netflix. I just checked.
They are, and also this actually was the matchup that I was referring to.
I thought it might be because I figured it had to be one where I hadn't seen one of the movies.
See, based on the cover of Raw and knowing what I know about It Follows, having not seen either of these, that tracks a little bit.
Yeah, I mean they're both the main characters are girls who are, in It Follows, I think they're in high school, and Raw it's her freshman in college, and it combines a lot of like things that are stigmatized with coming of age, with like just slow burn horror, and kind of like there's the horror of like what's happening to them, but also the horror of like they just want to be like normal. They just want to be normal, and like they still have like friends and social expectations, and like they, it's like being, getting embarrassed or like having something happen at school is like almost worse, than like
sure,
whatever.
Okay.
Like so, I think thematically, I think once you because Nate, I know you still have to see Raw, and Adam, have you seen Raw?
I gotta see both of these.
Okay, yeah, I think you'll agree that just thematically and kind of the pacing and everything, they're very similar. So this will be a very interesting matchup.
Yeah, definitely. And then lastly, on the left side of the bracket here in this region, the 2-7 matchup is Korean movie from 2016, The Wailing, against a cult classic Halloween movie from 2007, Trick or Treat.
Yes, indeed. And if you have listened to this podcast at all, you've already heard us rave about The Wailing on many occasions, basically any excuse that we have to talk about it.
Right. So let's just say Trick or Treat's got an uphill climb here, but
we will be giving its day in court.
Yes. I feel a little less bad just mentioning that because we have talked about The Wailing so often.
Yeah.
Anybody who's listened to us before has, like you mentioned, bound to have heard us talk about The Wailing at some point. So I do know, though, that there are a lot of Trick or Treat horror fans out there. I had never seen it before. I went and saw it at Willow Creek recently in the theater. for a random Wednesday night showing, and there were 2 full rows right in front of me.
Okay.
With like a bunch of people who knew each other who went out for a night together, like 10 to 12 of them, to go watch Trick or Treat again. And everybody there was having a great old time. So
yeah, I think this is similar to the Lighthouse and Dawn of the Dead matchup, where it's something very cerebral and serious and like artfully crafted versus something that's just fun.
Fun to watch with your friends.
Yeah, it's fun, Halloween, spooky stuff.
It's also like one of the matchups where like I know I'm gonna be interested to see the one I haven't seen. I haven't seen Trick or Treat yet, but then like I want to go back and rewatch The Wailing to be like, oh yeah,
but it's 2.5 hours long.
I love it. Exactly. Like I've got other things to get to, other things on this in the bracket that I haven't seen yet that I got to get to. And I'm like, I wish I could just spend like 2 weeks just watching these back to back.
Yeah,
because then you can really get a
Got any PTO left?
Unfortunately no. when I went through the list and I've watched the ones, there were a handful that I'd never seen. I already got those out of the way, so now it's at the point where it's like, which ones out of this do I feel like I need to rewatch? And The Wailing is like, I want to because I love that movie, but it's also like I've seen it like 5 times and it's 2.5 hours long,
and you feel very comfortable with your opinion on that movie.
Yes,
exactly, same. So that one's going to be really interesting. So that was the left side, and that brings us over to the right side of the bracket, and we'll get up to the top right, where we have the number 2 overall seed.
That's right. That makes sense.
Let the Right One In from 2008 against The Mist, the Stephen King adaptation from 2007. Adam, I don't think you were able to join us for this, but Dylan, was it last year or was it 2 years ago? I think it was the COVID summer.
Yeah, I think it was 2 years ago. We got together and I set up the TV outside on my deck on a nice fall day. It was probably in October.
And it was a beautiful day. It was like 68 degrees or something, like really warm. And we watched the black and white version of The Mist outside.
Oh,
yeah.
I didn't know there was 2 versions of that.
Yeah. It was a great time. And the black and white version, I think if you go on the internet, a lot of people think it's better than the original and kind of adds something to it, and I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that.
That's just, I like the regular in color theatrical release of the movie. I think the black and white gives it a very like 50s like classic horror movie kind of feel.
Yeah,
more of an aesthetic.
Almost like a Twilight Zone TV special type of.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, then I have to ask, because I haven't seen The Mist, although I know a lot about it because I've read about it before, because I know Stephen King and all that. Which one do you think I should try to seek out and find? I mean, especially because it's against Let the Right One In, which again, if this is another movie that if you have an podcast at all, you know that this is a favorite.
Yeah, so we did a Let's Make It Great episode on Let the Right One In podcast, which you can check out. If you can find it just as easily, watch the black and white version of The Mist.
Okay. I did just look quick, and it's on Netflix. The regular one's on Netflix. So.
Yeah. I mean, that's free for you.
Okay.
If black and white's hard to find, don't worry about it. But if it's easy to find the black and white version, because I have a DVD copy.
Yeah, you have to get a physical copy of it.
Where it's an extra on the DVD copy to watch the black and white version. So if you have to go to like those lengths, just watch the regular.
I mean, I could just like drive over to you and get it.
That's if I know where it is, which I will look. I promise.
Fair enough.
But I cannot promise that I haven't already just given it away.
That's fair.
I think I have it though, but yeah, we'll see. So that's going to be a fun matchup. I'm a big fan of both of those movies.
Yep.
And this is an interesting one too. The 4-5 here is The Others from 2001, very slow burn, cerebral type of horror, versus Us from Jordan Peele in 2019, which is just like batshit insanity.
Yep.
Yeah.
I would say thematically similar in that it's about, a mom trying to protect her family at the core of it. And so
I like that.
A lot of family stuff, but also 2 great lead performances, Nicole Kidman in The Others and Lupita Nyong'o in Us. So I mean, I think both of these are really great and honestly would make for like a great double feature. I just think that this is an interesting matchup. This one's gonna be hard to pick. I'm really on the fence about this one.
Again, going back to, I wish I could rewatch a bunch of these. I saw The Others probably like the year it came out or the year after it came out. So I was in like 6th grade, somewhere around there. And I saw Us like last year. I was like, I haven't seen The Others since. And it's like, I should probably get to that again. I remember liking it I remember like some certain scenes that are, where the twist or whatever happens.
Yeah.
And it's like, I remember really enjoying it, but like compared to us, like I just saw that. Like I should probably go back and see it, or at least like give myself a recap. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And really like do the double feature like you're talking about.
Yeah. It's on others is on the short list of ones I want to rewatch before, because I'm kind of in the same boat.
I watched the others like 2 times in the last 4 years or something, so I'm pretty good on that.
Mm-hmm.
If I can get to it, I might want to rewatch Us, but that was all. It's fresh enough. I mean, it only came out in 2019. So.
Yeah.
That's
what I mean. It's like I'm gonna coast on the fact that I've seen Us recently, but the others is like I remember a lot of the pivotal scenes, but
mm-hmm.
Full.
Yeah, you gotta rewatch. You gotta get the full experience.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Down to the 3-6 matchup here in this region. This the Witch against the Babadook. And this is another perfect example of like what kind of the 2010s horror is.
For sure. And
I got to say too, I was surprised that The Witch didn't score higher here. I think it's really low on IMDb.
I'm not surprised.
I do know people who hate this movie. I am not one of those people, and I don't understand those people. But they exist. But I was really surprised to see that this was the lower rated of the 2 Eggers horror movies.
I am definitely surprised at that. And I also, it pains me, but I have members of my own family who are convinced that The Witch is so overrated and like,
oh my God.
And then like, there's me and my Aunt Rondi who just have to every single time it comes up, just can't let it go, like how wrong they are about like how great The Witch is.
I understand why people have the opinion that it's a bad movie. Like I showed it to a fair amount of people, and a lot of people come back and said like that sucked. Like why did you give that? Like why'd you tell me to watch that? And a lot of it's like the old timey like English, or like the hard to understand. It's a little quiet at parts. It's not overly like scary. It's not like your slasher movies are like some of that. It's a little bit more cerebral, and you need to like pay attention to a little bit more. Like it's one of those of like you have to, you have to really like pay attention, but also like it's not overt in any of the like the themes of it being like super super scary. You have to think about it, and even if you think about it and you think like that's really cool, that doesn't always make it like your favorite thing. For
me, The Witch is an absolute masterclass in the horror of the unseen.
Yes.
And that's where I think people sometimes just don't really know how to watch this movie. Like there are a lot of like the people
very weird
like that we've talked about who want to sit down with a horror movie that's something like 28 Days Later or something that's like monsters and
more traditional,
more on like the fun side that you can kind of watch with some beers and your friends. The Witch is a movie, if you're looking for something like that, where you're going to feel yourself constantly waiting for something to happen, for like the scary thing to show up on screen. The scary stuff in The Witch is what isn't on screen. And when what your imagination conjures up while you're just like staring at nothing and something's out there. And that's where The Witch is terrifying for me. My dad thinks it's like one of the scariest movies he's ever seen.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get too much.
I was going to say we're starting to analyze
talk about it more,
but that kind of rolls into like how the Babadook has some of that as well. Like it's always about like what you anticipate to be the scary thing, not what actually is the scary thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So, and I think
this is a thematic matchup I kind of like.
I thought it was interesting that they came up together because they're kind of, I think, 2 of like the poster childs for the sort of this new age of this new style of horror movie that we got in the 2010s. So I think that one's going to be really fascinating. And then also they're both like kind of, like critical darlings that audiences are a little split on.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get this matchup, which I'm also very fascinated by.
Oh boy.
A Quiet Place versus the 7 seed Dr. Sleep.
Can I abstain from this one? Like, can I?
Honestly, Adam, I saw this and I thought Adam is gonna break his brain trying to decide.
I don't know what I'm gonna choose. I don't.
Yeah. Like, which one of your children gets to live, Adam?
Exactly.
But you have to vote. We're gonna make you vote first.
Oh, that's the worst.
Oh yeah.
I know Adam's a huge fan of Dr. Sleep, and we had to get something from Flanagan in here, even though most of what he's known for are his miniseries, which are admittedly, I think, the best stuff he's done.
Bananas, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But Dr. Sleep in here against A Quiet Place. These are bigger name movies than a matchup like The Witch versus The Babadook. These are like bigger studio horror movies.
For sure.
And with, bigger actors kind of right in front of your face. This is an interesting one too. And again, another one where I really want to rewatch Dr. Sleep. I've heard the extended version is amazing. Kind of a rule of thumb for this. We're talking theatrical releases for these movies. Unless, if you have a director's cut and there's like one extra scene, who cares? But for stuff like Dr. Sleep and Midsummer, where there are director's cuts that are like 30 to 40 minutes longer, that's not what we're talking about when we're voting here. We're talking strict.
Yes.
What is everyone saw in the theater?
Yeah.
And I looking at these two, I think they're both great. We both talked about them. I mean, we've been doing the podcast since these have been released. So like if you
after A Quiet Place, A Quiet Place was out before we ever did the podcast.
Oh, was it? Okay.
I think we've talked about it, though.
Dr. Sleep, you can go back and find the episode where we talk about that. And then I think it was on some of our top 10 of the year lists. Really, the biggest difference between these two, I think, is, one is Dr. Sleep is kind of the shining sequel. It's based on, the Stephen King book, whereas A Quiet Place feels like it was kind of just like an original idea, or more original than Dr. Sleep, right? Kind of completely new idea and very innovative. And then also just the runtime. A Quiet Place is a tight 90 minutes and Dr. Sleep is like 2 hours and
it's like 2 hours and 20 something. It's long.
Yeah, like
an hour longer.
Like, quality per minute is like
it's 2.5. It's 2:32.
There's also just the element that A Quiet Place was designed for the movie theater.
Yeah,
true.
It's just effective. Like, the movie is without a doubt the best way to experience the story of A Quiet Place. Whereas Dr. Sleep is also a book, and you can argue over which way is better.
Agreed.
So
we'll get into it.
We will get into it, and some of us, Adam, are going to have to make a decision.
Yeah, I know.
So, getting into the last region here, we have this one. For me, is going to be very difficult. This is how Adam felt about the last one. This is the number 3 overall seed, Hereditary, against The Endless from 2017. And I just rewatched Hereditary. I want to rewatch The Endless if I can get to it before we vote. This is an interesting one. We got Ari Aster's first movie, and then just like The Endless being this very creative, super low budget endeavor. I think The Endless is another one of those ones where some people might not consider it a horror movie, but we wanted to include it.
Oh, I think
it just snuck in with one of the last 3 seeds, or one of the last 3 seeds. So this is a fascinating one for me. I know we've talked about these movies at least amongst ourselves before. Dylan and I are both big fans. Adam hasn't. Have we all seen both of these?
I've seen both of these. Yeah.
Okay.
We watched The Endless together. I'm pretty sure.
That's right.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like Hereditary is like the widely accepted, very popular one. And The Endless is just like the little darling of this podcast. It's like our little baby boy. Just
Adam,
like
can you check
the movie that we've been
is on
trying
Netflix
to promote.
I'll look.
And this is another one where it's like, just even if it doesn't win a matchup, the fact that we included it here, if you've never heard of The Endless, I talked to one of my buddies last week who's a huge horror fan, and he had never even heard of it.
Oh. So it's streaming on Peacock and AMC.
Yep.
Otherwise, obviously, it's available to rent. So
right, but Peacock and AMC. So there are some places where you can stream that movie. So Hereditary, The Endless. This one is going to be interesting. There's a chance it could just be a wash, but there's also a chance it could get a little heated. So
that's the one where I feel like I'm going to be the deciding vote.
It's maybe we'll see.
Because
we'll see. It's
And then this was also fascinating to me. We have a potential second round matchup of the 2 Ari Aster movies.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah.
But in order to do that, Hereditary will have to defeat The Endless, and now we got the 4 seed Midsummer against the 5 seed The Orphanage.
Ooh.
I still haven't seen The Orphanage. It's been on my list for a really, really long time. I actually thought I bought it at one point. I bought a movie called The Orphanage from Half Price Books for like $2. And my dad and I were up north, and it was like we're up north, like in late September. It was nighttime, like super dark on the lake. and I threw The Orphanage in thinking it was this, and it was just some other foreign horror movie called The Orphanage, and it was garbage. And we watched like 3 minutes of it, and it was horrible.
And
I
you're
was
just
like, is this the thing? I was like, no, I swear, this is supposed to be good.
Say that's Del Toro, isn't it?
Well, he's a producer on this movie.
Okay.
Yeah. But the one that I found was not this movie. And I even looked it up, and I found what it was, and it had horrible reviews. And I think I just threw it in the garbage can.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's appropriate.
So I still haven't seen The Orphanage. Obviously, we're all going to get to all of these before we vote, but I like Midsommar a lot. So seeing a movie I haven't seen and I've always wanted to see just up against this movie that I love was almost a little disappointing, because I was just like, oh, The Orphanage is going to have to be great. So
yeah, it's going to have to really wow you to get you to pick it over.
Yeah, but I have high hopes. I've heard really good things. Dylan watched it last week and you liked it. So
I did. Yep. I mean, it's definitely got an uphill battle, but I will say, like, I think after seeing it and then like reading some of the other reviews, and I think it is deserving of a spot on this list. I feel like this was maybe the movie that when we made this list, this was like maybe the one that none of us had seen. Cause even with the other more obscure ones, A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, or The Devil's Backbone, one of us at least had seen it and could like co-sign, like, oh yeah, it deserves to be here. With this one, none of us had seen it. So when I watched it, I feel like it was deserving to make the cut of the 32. Okay. And I'm intrigued to see what you both think of it.
I mean, anything that Del Toro puts his stamp on or produces or something, it's hard to be like, oh, that was bad. Or like, not what I wanted. You know what I mean? So it's going to end up being something I'm sure we'll enjoy. We'll just see how it stacks.
Yeah. All right, 2 matchups left, and we've got this one is just like the fun matchup.
This is absolutely the best matchup, the fun matchup in the entire.
This is tough.
Actually, this one and the next one I think are both probably in that category.
The lower right of this region is just like pure fun.
Just all great. I'm sad that all four, like out of those 4 movies, like only one will move on. Right.
So we got the 3 against the 6 here with 28 Days Later and The Cabin in the Woods. I still haven't seen 28 Days Later yet. I'm going to watch it tonight, I think, or tomorrow.
Okay.
I've got 5 of these I haven't seen, so they'll all be watched in the next like 7 days or something.
Yeah.
But this to me feels like the number one matchup of like bros on a Friday night in October wanting to like throw back some beers and watch a horror movie.
100%.
That's how I feel about this matchup.
Okay. Okay.
Am I wrong?
No, I think you're right.
I think you're
28
right.
Days Later, especially. 28 Days Later is such a guy's movie, in my opinion. Movie. It's just the way it's filmed, the zombies, but they're not really zombies. They're just like, it's like a virus. Like, I don't know.
Okay.
You'll but man, I think this is a really good matchup. And I just wanted to say too, with The Cabin in the Woods, remember at the beginning of this podcast, we talked about how we didn't include the comedy horrors, or like if it was too much of a comedy, we didn't include it. Cabin in the Woods was very borderline, but me and Nate came to the decision that it is primarily a horror movie.
Yeah.
And while there's definitely funny parts, it legit leans into and wants to be a horror movie. I mean, but until you know the twist, really, like the first 30 minutes or so, like it's basically a straight horror movie. And then everything else is meant as an homage or like a love letter to horror movies, not so much a like, I don't know. We felt it was borderline, but that it made the cut as opposed to like Zombieland.
It's definitely the closest to being cut for comedy out of any of these 32, but it's definitely deserving to be in here. It reminds me sort of like 13 Ghosts from back in the day. Like Matthew Lillard and all that. That's a little bit more like fantastical than this is. And I think that's why like that's something we wouldn't include where this is. I also I showed this to a bunch of friends, people who don't watch movies. And I was like, I had never seen it. I was like, all right, cool, let's throw Cabin in the Woods on it. After we were done, we're like, man, I'm so happy we chose this and not something like super like cerebral and like, oh, you gotta really understand the art of like what this is to really enjoy it, right?
It's so fun. It's about as like opposite end of the spectrum from like the Lighthouse that you can get.
It's accessible, and that's helpful as well.
And Dylan, the way I thought about it too is like, if I didn't laugh at the jokes, is like there's still a purpose of the movie here, and there is. I don't immediately think of the comedy. I like it is funny, but there's some very scary scenes in this movie, and I think it definitely deserves to be here. This is a really fascinating matchup. I'm excited to watch 28 Days Later, so I don't know how I'm going to vote on this, but I'm very open to going either way at this point. So
yeah,
that one's going to be fun. And then honestly, probably the second one that was the one that was second closest to being cut for comedy would be the 7 seed here, Ready or Not, against the 2, Train to Busan. These movies are also both very fun.
Yeah.
Ready or Not, I thought looked so stupid.
I agree.
When I saw the trailer.
I think we both
watched
did.
it. And it was great. And Adam, I think you still need to see Train to Busan. I also think that's fascinating, where I'll just bring this here again, but like we kind of have these two
zombie movies.
Zombie movies. That's why I think this is so fascinating, where it just kind of did this, where we got the Ari Aster stuff maybe in round 2 and the zombie stuff maybe in round 2, or maybe the 2 like sort of comedies.
Yeah.
Right.
We just got a lot of matchups here that feel a little too obvious almost.
Mm-hmm.
The good is this is like it absolutely was not intentional. It was not built.
I still haven't decided on this one either. I like both of these movies a lot. And yeah, it's going to be a fun one.
Yeah, no, I think we've got Ready or Not and Cabin in the Woods are representing the fun comedy horror contingent. And like you said, we've got Train to Busan, 28 Days Later, and then Dawn of the Dead representing the fast zombie, new era zombie flicks. No, this is going to be fascinating. I'm a little torn on this one as well.
Well, there you have it. That is all 32 movies. That is all 16 matchups that we've got for next week. Again, like we've said, we haven't all seen all of these, but we're getting to them, so they will be fresh in our minds for when we do actually go through the episode and have our opinions laid bare. We'll be looking at any voting that gets done. I like that we have 3 people for this, because there's those ones that each of us has like, oh, these 2 movies are very near and dear to my heart. Who's going to be the deciding factor? And like what arguments are going to get made for and against each of these masterpieces in whatever fashion you want to call them a masterpiece, right?
Yeah. And just to briefly touch on some of the movies that did not make the cut, if you're listening to this and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe this isn't on there. They either didn't have the numbers, or we felt there was like for instance, The Ring with Naomi Watts. Like you mentioned, Nate, like that's based on a Japanese horror flick, and the original has higher ratings than The Ring does.
That's from the 90s.
And that's from the 90s. And then also like Paranormal Activity, the original, like, yes, it was
really low.
It scored really low. And like, in the same way that Saw sparked a whole franchise and kind of was very new and innovative for the time, like we kind of maybe wanted to sneak in Paranormal Activity just for that reason as like the 32 or 31 seed. But at the end of the day, the ratings across the board just are not good. And so it just didn't make the cut. I'm trying to think of some other ones. There was the
Invisible Man. We just didn't feel like had quite a big enough of a following, but that one was strongly considered.
Yeah, we saw that. We reviewed it. Me and Adam did.
We liked it. It was like good, it wasn't quite enough to be considered like one of the best horror movies of the recent.
We should say we kind of left like anything that was just numerically like in the top 20. We just left it there
for sure.
We only really got into the nitty gritty on the lower rated ones, because we felt like none of us had seen Raw, but that was like, that got a 3 seed. It was like in the top 12 or something. Yeah. So it kind of felt like who are we to just cut that one?
Mm-hmm.
But that was also why we went with numbers and didn't make ourselves watch everything in order to decide what made it.
And that gives us the opportunity to see movies that we didn't know about, like Raw, and then like give it a true like opinion on, especially after I forget what it's against, but against something that we've probably seen.
It follows.
Yeah, that I know for sure you guys like. It's really gives you like fresh eyes, and especially when you get to compare it and then say, if it makes it out of the first round, then it's got to stack up against another great movie, and you get to go, okay, why does it deserve to be there? Why is it better in these regards than X or whatever?
That's a great example. And also, I doubt that there's very many people who are clamoring for this, but there's a foreign movie, A Tale of Two Sisters.
I just mentioned that. I watched that, and there's also another one called Pulse, which is very divisive, it felt like, and neither of those scored in the top, like in it, like they didn't make it when we just did the numbers. So then we watched a few of those to see, should we jump them up, should we bump them down, and it just didn't feel like there wasn't enough there for me to jump it up over something like The Endless or Dawn of the Dead or Saw.
Yeah.
Or The Mist or something. Like those are the movies those are the last 4 seeds. So anything that was going to make it was going to be instead of one of those 4. So we're pretty happy with where it turned out. And also we should say anything that didn't make it was probably never going to win. So
yeah,
probably not. And, we really, we tried to get Barbarian in there because we all loved it so much. But
listen, I don't know that you guys have talked about it yet. I know the storyline based on what Nate has talked to me about, but I now need to see this movie.
We'll keep it out. Nate, because I was gone for the roundup.
Happens.
I was gone for the roundup that month. Did you not even mention it in the roundup? Oh,
no.
Nope.
You're just disappointed me.
Disgusted. Doesn't even deserve dud of the month.
I had some other things I wanted to. I had 3 classics I watched that month that I didn't like.
Okay,
so that felt more like
it's now gotten more mentions in this episode than that episode. So we'll leave it there.
So there is the full bracket. Like we mentioned, we'll provide the link in the description of the episode. Please go fill it out for yourself, just for fun.
We're curious to see what people think.
Really, we really are. I mean, because it'll be interesting to see what you all pick, and then when we do the selection show, I mean, there's 3 of us, so we're gonna.
We just did the
no matter how hard it is, we're gonna get there, and I'm kind of.
Yeah.
I'll be really interested to see how that shakes out too.
Gonna go all the way through it. Hopefully we'll all still be friends by the end of it.
Yeah,
we'll see.
It'll be a
little doubt in Dylan's voice there.
I always knew he didn't like me. No, it will be a bit of a longer episode for those of you listening or anything. So hopefully you're into some of that as you're watching us. We'll have our videos and stuff going up, or our I was gonna say graphics.
We'll have the bracket up for sure.
So you'll be able to watch some of that. We'll keep it entertaining the entire time, but it's going to be a debate, and hopefully you can join us in on some of that debate. I mean, again, tweet us, shoot us an Instagram message. Like, I definitely thought this one should have been included, or how in the world do you think this is better than that? We'd love to hear that kind of stuff. Absolutely. Yeah. Throw the comments on YouTube. So we're excited for this episode. We've been working on it for quite a while, and it should be fun.
Also, another benefit of just kind of doing it by numbers is it provides a little bit of pass blocking for the wrath of the internet.
Yep.
Yeah.
We can always
absolutely.
Yeah.
We didn't make the choice. The numbers did for the most part.
Don't lie, baby.
But what we vote on next week is going to be all our opinions. So if you hate our opinions, then it's all us.
Or if you hate one person's opinion, let us know. We'll use that against them in later episodes.
Right.
When me and Nate form an alliance and It Follows goes all the way to the final 4, or no, not what was the other one? Or not It Follows. The Endless. When me and Nate just form a pact and we carry The Endless all the way to
the Adam thinks it's like just okay.
Just getting beat down by like Dr. Sleep. It takes out like all my favorites. I'm just like, how? I can't fight you.
I just want to find whatever movie I know that in here that Adam just hates and just vote for that to keep going.
Just push it through over and over and over again. Yeah.
I've tried to be as cryptic as possible leading up to it.
Yeah, he's keeping his cards close to the chest.
We'll see.
Yeah.
All right.
This is a really fun episode.
Yes.
It's good to have all 3 of us here, and all 3 of us will be back next week again. We need 3 people. We can't do this with 2.
We cannot.
Can't have ties.
All right. Is there anything else, or I believe it's my turn to put a wrap on the show?
Take it away.
Take it away, and Adam, you've got the closing button. So
all right.
as I call it, I don't call it that.
All right. Take it away when you're ready.
We should just cut that. I might just get rid of it.
I'll go in and edit that out.
Keep it. We'll do
it
live.
Policy here. We keep everything, even the weird stuff we say when we just make a mistake.
Exactly.
All right. Am I allowed to put an end on the show, or should we just?
You are allowed.
We're gonna keep going.
Put an end on the show. Get me out of here.
For the love of God, put it out of its misery. All right. Over to me. I and others have come to a belief that your heart is not in this, that you don't have the belly for it.